Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, June 4th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. I am now hereby today announcing to all listeners and to all readers of Commentary and to all interested parties something that has not exactly been a secret, but I am making public the fact that our 2024 Commentary Roastee, our annual dinner, our annual benefit on Sunday, November 17th, 2024 in New York City will be none other than Natan Sharansky. Perhaps the greatest living Jewish hero, which raises the interesting question, how on earth do you roast the greatest living Jewish hero? And if you want to find out how we're going to roast Natan Sharansky in person, live in New York City on November 17th, you're going to have to come. You're going to have to buy a seat. You're going to have to buy a table. You're going to want to sponsor this event. Everybody who has been to this event, this is, I think, our 14th, I believe, thinks this is their favorite such event of the year. We hear that all the time. It's a high-spirited, fun, lively gathering of the commentary community with good food, surprise guests, and you're out in 2 hours. It's a killer event. Go to commentary.org/roast for more information. It's not a cheap ticket. It's certainly not a cheap table, but it is worth your time. It's worth your money. It's worth your support. And it is worth your soul to pay tribute to Natan Sharansky, because these roasts, though they are nominally roasts, are really tribute dinners to extraordinary people. And we have not had a more extraordinary person sitting in the chair of dishonor than Natan Sharansky. So that is the 2024 Commentary Roast with Natan Sharansky, commentary.org/roast. I'm now here with executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
Media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
And joining us today, commentary contributing editor and big cheese at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and host of the FDD Morning Brief, their Monday, Wednesday, Friday 20-minute podcast, both visual and audio, in which you can get all the important news going on in the world of disasters and horrors and nightmares facing democracies all over the world. Jonathan Schanzer. Hey,
Hello,
Schanzer.
John.
Thanks
Hello.
for joining us.
My pleasure.
Jonathan Schanzer, this weekend, you put up a pretty dazzling piece on the commentary website, which, if you will give me a second, I'm going to allude to very specifically as I boot up our site, the policies that are killing Israeli soldiers. Yesterday, I believe, either yesterday or Sunday, was for Israel's military the bloodiest day of the war thus far. I think there were 40 to 50 casualties as forces both deal with trouble in the Jabalia refugee camp and in Rafah as they slowly and laboriously attempt to make their way through the city and figure out how the tunnel system works and how to handle it. And this is not by accident. It is not by accident that Israeli casualty numbers are now rising. This is the result of deliberate policy choices, and you say deliberate policy choices that were basically either forced upon the Israelis or that prudence dictated to Israel that it needed to follow in order to remain in good odor with the Biden administration.
Yes, and I think that the Biden administration policies have allowed Hamas, Iran, Islamic Jihad, and others the time and space that they have needed in order to prepare IEDs, improvised explosive devices, to prepare the booby traps that we're now seeing exploding in Rafah and beyond. In other words, this pause that we've now seen in this war began in mid-March. The administration started calling on the Israelis to slow their roll in Gaza. They were on the 5-yard line, close to finishing all of the hard fighting in Gaza. And all of a sudden, we began to hear from the administration that, Ramadan was coming and that we didn't want a full-blown religious war in the region. And I think, look, the Israelis understood that. They've dealt with Ramadan in the past and they understood the concerns and the sensitivity. But then as soon as Ramadan was over, we began to hear about the 1.4 million displaced people in Rafah that needed to be moved first, and that there was a humanitarian crunch that was going on and the Israelis needed to do more. So they were asked to pause again. And then we began to see some of the legal maneuvering at the ICC and the ICJ. And you had the administration once again telling the Israelis, don't take another step because you're going to get yourself in, more hot water. And I think the cumulative effect has been a 3-month pause in this war. And that has given the advantage back to Iran and its proxies. And I think it's just disastrous. We're seeing the Israelis, I think, really getting frustrated. You can watch it in the Israeli media that they feel like, they were winning and now they're losing. And then I think even more disconcerting is the fact that you've got these Israeli soldiers that are being wounded and killed as a result of attacks laid probably months ago by the Islamic Republic and their proxies.
So, Habib Reddigur on Dan Senor's podcast yesterday made two interesting points that I'd like to reflect on. The first is that Israel has had to teach itself how to fight this war because, of course, it never had to engage with the tunnel system. I mean, it had, in previous incursions into Gaza, dealt with tunnels that were emerging directly into Israel and sealing them off and closing them. But the size of the tunnel system was so alarming and so surprising, and the fact that it had been hardened against aerial bombardment meant that the early weeks of the war ended up being very, I don't know how I would describe it, because very hard from the air and a lot of destruction while they attempted to penetrate the tunnels from the air and discovered they could not do that. So after Gaza City was practically leveled and they started moving south to Khan Yunis and now to Rafah, they have learned how to fight this war. And they've learned that, and so the casualty numbers for the Gazans have dropped precipitously, as your own David Adesnik has been detailing, not only in our pages, but in daily work for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. So they're fighting the cleanest war against an urban insurgency the world has ever seen. And yet, to the American administration dealing with domestic and international strife, America's trapped back in November when Israel was sort of, bombing a lot from the air and full of you're committing too many casualties and it's too dangerous and things are too bad and everything is so terrible. And so that's Habib's point is how Israel's fought this war now compared to how it's fighting, how it fought it then. These are two different wars, and every war involves the military figuring out how to fight it. Like that's part of the ideology of warfare. And the second point is that until Biden made the speech on Thursday, the prior week in Rafah had been an unmitigated success for Israel, which was starting to secure its war aims in Rafah. It took the Philadelphia corridor, thus closing off the escape routes to Egypt and occupying, and basically figuring out how to keep Hamas cornered in this south corner of Gaza. Did not set the tents on fire as they had been accused of doing, and were having successes in Jabalia against the insurgency there. And then Biden steps up on Friday and says, stop the war. And that this is incredibly frustrating because, like you said, they were on the 5-yard line in March. So now they're on the 3-yard line in June. And the president of the United States has said, stop the war. Hamas can't hurt you the way it hurt you on October 7th. So take the win. Here's a Band-Aid. Get some hostages out. Maybe you get more. Maybe you could even get more hostages out later if you're nice enough to stop the war now. You know, even as Israel discovers more and more corpses of hostages in the most horrifying of conditions, suggesting treatment during their captivity that I can't even bear to read about. So, war fighting is being interfered with on the verge of victory. Abe, let me ask you a question. What does this say about the United States that it is actively interceding, or as how would you say it? It is interposing itself in some fashion between Israel and Hamas at a key moment when Israel could be starting to deal the knockout blow?
Well, I don't know if it says, I don't know that it's what it says so much about the United States as about this administration, because from what I can tell in polling, the immediate ceasefire is not the most popular way ahead as far as most Americans are concerned. What it says about this administration is that they are completely turned around. Are they turned around solely? I mean, this remains the question. Solely for political reasons, misguided, solely because Biden believes that imposing a ceasefire will do him some good come November? Or is it because of ideologues in the administration who fervently believe that this is an atrocity, that you can't actually defeat Hamas, and it's been enough? And I don't know the answer.
There was a strange shift in the rhetoric in this last statement that Biden made that reminded me of a domestic criminal justice front, the restorative justice movement, right? This idea that when someone commits a heinous crime, we should all get together in a circle and talk about how it made us feel. And there's a way in which they are acting as if Hamas is not a terrorist organization with a death wish for the state of Israel and Jews more broadly, and instead can be brought into this restorative justice idea and through diplomacy and through little nudges and carrots and sticks here and there, brought round to this idea. And it really came through, and it's so shocking to hear it said, but that is actually on the left side of the aisle a pretty common theme, certainly in criminal justice reform domestically, but I'm seeing it now seep into international diplomacy in a way that's quite worrisome.
Seth, you put up a post a couple of days ago making the very deep point that we don't even have time to really delve into as a historical, social, sociological matter, but that the Biden administration is actively seeking to take victory off the table, and that this is part of a longer and much deeper issue with the way that the West now conducts warfare, which is overwhelming, can have overwhelming consequences. A 21st century first-rate military can do damage and change civilizations and countries in a way that no warfare before it ever could even possibly begin to reach. But we have an allergy to finishing the job or doing something where we say, okay, we have won the war. We have changed the condition of the world, which is actually what wars are about. And therefore, we are now moving into the day after the war where we are going to write a constitution, or we are going to do this, or we are going to do that. We don't want to say that. We don't want to do that. We don't want to look like colonizers. And in this case, it's almost as though Israel is doing something offensive by having declared that its intention is to wipe out its enemy. That's just you know, that's just too far. That goes too far. We can't wipe anybody out. I'm sorry, no wiping out. The days when Colin Powell said at the beginning of the Gulf War in 1990 or 1991, when he said, first we're going to surround the Iraqi army, and then we are going to kill it. That is what the man leading the war in 1991 said in the United States. Can you imagine the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 2024 in a comparable situation saying, we are going to surround the army of Gablavistan and we are going to kill it?
Honestly, I can't even imagine Mad Dog James Mattis saying the things and getting praised for the things that he said only a few years ago. Like, I think this is actively getting worse, right? Mattis was praised for being a guy who said, be polite, be kind, and have a plan to kill everyone you meet, and all these things. And people were saying that's how you be a general. I don't even think you could get away with saying that anymore. But I think that what they've done is they've gone a step beyond whether they should seek victory, and have begun convincing themselves it's not possible. I refer to the Biden administration, not the Israelis, obviously. The Biden administration has decided that its talking point is going to be, you can't win. We can't win. And at the beginning of this war, getting rid of, really just destroying Hamas, was something that was agreed upon by everybody. And every once in a while, Biden slips and says, that's a righteous goal, to get rid of Hamas. In the same speech where he'll say it's not possible and you don't care about the hostages if you're going to focus on destroying Hamas. But at the beginning of the war, Barack Obama had said, we got to support Israel in destroying Hamas. We all pointed out that the statements coming out from people, not just from the administration, but all around, were understanding of the fact that Hamas can't continue. And then now we're retreating back on our own words, and we are convincing ourselves, we're talking ourselves out of winning. This is what we constantly do. It's not just that there's some sort of strategic assessment being made of the situation, and the Joint Chief says this would be better than that. A would be better than B, would be better than C. It's that the president and his top officials and cabinet members are out there kind of talking out loud through the idea that victory isn't possible. And the thing that really bothers me about it is, first of all, this kind of talk has effects down the line, right? This isn't when you spend all this time talking yourself out of the idea of victory, it becomes a mantra, it becomes policy, and all that follows, and it just becomes sort of the way things are. But the other problem with that is that people who Americans really do look through a lot of this stuff through the framing of the Iraq War, which is a place very far away from America, and is a place where we can sort of decide to declare the end of hostilities, because they're not going to come over here and invade America after the war, right? In other words, but Israel doesn't have that luxury. It's a luxury to talk about a country thousands of miles away and say, we went over there and we made these mistakes and we don't want Israel to make these mistakes. But there really isn't a day after for Israel if Hamas is there. It doesn't exist. And this is right next door, and they were invaded by people who were practically neighbors. And so this is the problem with this idea of, all wars are basically the same, and the principle of war is you do this and that. You can't just apply a one size fits all, even if it weren't a stupid idea, which victory is impossible is a stupid idea, but right, you can't just lay it out there on somebody who's
but the
who's next door to the enemy.
Can I say that? But the administration isn't even applying this as a one size fits all, because the administration just loosened its rules for Ukraine about firing American weapons into Russia. So they've decided that war, in which Zelensky has said the goal is to get all the Russians out of Ukrainian territory. That one's not impossible. This one, where Israel has the final brigades in one place and is ready to go, that one's impossible. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to pit the two against each other, but it's Ukraine's got a heavier lift in terms of the military job.
It's worse than that.
Go ahead.
I get to say it's worse than that to you, because Ukraine is both the flip side and the logical conclusion of what we're talking about, which is we're in it. Ukraine's got to win. All of that. Ukraine says, okay, we need to fire missiles into Russian territory. You can't fire missiles into Russian territory. American missiles cannot be used to fire into Russian territory. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to fight a war for 2 years. You're going to lose in casualties, in blood, in treasure, in cities, in buildings, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and billions of dollars in income and industry and all of that. And then when your back's against the wall and Russia's about to win, then maybe we'll let you fire some missiles into Russia as some kind of weird face-saving way to not be accused of being responsible for your defeat, when people like us said at the time, give them what they need to win the war. And America refused to do it. America refused to give them tanks. America refused to give them planes. America refused to give them ATACMS. America refused to do all sorts of stuff for a year because the Joint Chiefs of Staff were worried that it would, I don't know, that Russia would nuke Lawrence, Kansas, like in the day after. I have no idea what actually was going through their heads. Here, we have the same complementary opposite situation. Israel's on the verge of winning, and they want to stop the victory. They're doing some weird face-saving thing with Ukraine to try to muddy the possible conclusion of the war in Russia's favor, to say we did everything we could. And when Ukraine had its back against the wall, yes, we approved the use of these, even though it's so controversial that we did it. It's the same psychology. America is not for allowing its allies to win wars, because we don't try to win wars anymore, and they shouldn't either, because who the hell are they to win a war when we think that we're beyond winning and all we need is a ceasefire? And that's what's important. Let me take a quick break and talk to you about our friend David Bahnsen's remarkable book, Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life. As I told you yesterday, as we started talking about David's book, it is deep in the ethos of commentary, in commentary's tradition as part of the Jewish way of thinking about the world and our existence, that work is a bedrock in flourishing society, a pivotal component in the God-given dignity of every person. If you read through, for example, the Torah, as we do every week, so much of the Torah is a series of rules, regulations, and directions about how to work, how to deal with labor, how to deal with economic matters, how taxation works, how labor works. That is at the very beginning of Western civilization as we understand it. And David Bahnsen has taken this message to its full potential with his new book, Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life. In public policy and culture, even in religious bodies, too often today work is seen as a necessary evil and not the universal blessing that it is. It is a therapeutic, cathartic vehicle for dealing with challenging circumstances in life. And David ultimately argues that the other things we value in a well-ordered life, like marriage, children, community, worship, these are all enhanced when we properly prioritize and centralize work and don't treat it like it's a necessary evil that lets us do the more important things that we want to do, that it is an integral part of everything that we are commanded to do to flourish. Again, as Jews say every morning when they say the morning Shema, that we are to labor, do good, and we will be rewarded with rain and good harvests and all the good things in life. This is not the kind of book on work you have ever read. It is something deeper. It is something larger. That's David Bahnsen's Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life. Get it today at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever fine books are sold. And you can check it out more at fulltimebook.com. Allergic.com. Jonathan Schanzer, you are getting increasingly alarmed, as am I, and as is every rational person, after months of trying to figure out what the hell is going on, that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is, of course, not the sole decision maker in the Gaza war. He is part of a triumvirate, a troika, that makes all the military decisions called the War Cabinet. So whenever you hear people say, Bibi did this, and Bibi said that, and Bibi's doing this, and Bibi did that, just remember that all the policy decisions are not in his hands alone. 3 people have to vote on them. Nonetheless, something bad is going on with him and has been going bad with him over the last 2 weeks. I would date that beginning with the inexplicable decision that he made. Though I don't think it's inexplicable. I think it's inexplicable in policy terms, not in emotional terms or in political terms, for him to have decided to advance some kind of proposal we still don't even understand for some kind of a ceasefire with Hamas at a negotiation in Paris that gave Biden the opening to say, oh, good, we can stop the war now. We don't know the terms of that deal. We don't really understand what's going on with it. But the minute that happened, and the weeks, the sort of weeks or 10 days or whatever that have followed it, things are slipping out of control. While the Rafah operation is going okay, other stuff is not going okay.
It's not going okay. And I think we have to face facts here that Bibi looks like he's slipping. Now, I don't want to say that he's lost it and that he can't come back, because, Israeli politicians have a way of reincarnating, and anybody can fight their way back into the mix, but he looks lost right now. Not only has he allowed the U.S. to dictate the terms of the war in Gaza, as we've just discussed, for the last 3 months, and he's gone from the 5-yard line to the 3-yard line, as we discussed, and that's not enough, I think, for any Israeli watching this. Not only has he failed to deliver the hostages, which, of course, we see their numbers dwindling every day, but then we have the chaos from this deal that Biden put on the table. I still don't know whether he approved the plan to begin with, and I still don't know whether...
Wait, who's the he there? You mean
Bibi? Okay. I don't know whether Bibi approved this thing to be announced in the first place, and I still don't know whether he actually endorses it or not. And by the way, it's insane to hear the administration spin this right now. They talk about this deal as some kind of genius diplomatic stroke along the lines of Resolution 242 in the aftermath of the 1967 war, where it's vague enough for all sides to agree. I don't buy it. I think it's insane. But the point is that Bibi's not come out and clarified where he was. He looks like he is hemmed in by the administration. They look like they have basically, they've been giving him a bear hug, and now he just has increasingly just less room to maneuver. But then there's the other part of this, which is, if you've been watching over the last 24 hours, the news in Israel, the north is literally burning, right? You can now see that there are acres of territory.
2,400 acres are currently on fire in the north of Israel, around and outside the town of Kiryat Shmona. And it looks like California last year.
Correct.
The sky is orange, and it's burning, and they don't know how to put it out.
Yep. It's filled with smoke, and it's in the middle of the summer, and it's hot and it's dry. And this is the direct result of Hezbollah rocket fire. It probably is worth reminding folks that, Hezbollah's fired 4,000 to 5,000 different rockets and drones and missiles at Israel since October 8th. The Israelis have been warned time and again by this administration not to respond. And right now it looks as if Israel is frozen in Gaza. They're frozen in terms of where they are with, U.S.-led diplomacy. They're frozen in the north. I don't see leadership right now. And that is beginning to really bother me, because this is the moment where Bibi needs to change the narrative. He needs to inspire his people. I mean, I will say this. I don't know. I certainly don't know what the administration's strategy is for winning this war other than surrender, as I think Seth just articulated. But that doesn't mean that the Israelis shouldn't have a strategy for victory. If anything, right now, it looks like Bibi is paralyzed. He's uncertain how to move forward because of the politics and because of the pressure from the United States. This could be the moment where Bibi falls. It could be.
Okay.
Can I ask a question on that? Because you're Jonathan, you're there, every so often, and I'm so curious as to, because it certainly looks that way from here. I mean, there just doesn't seem to be a plan, but also the polling in Israel. Can I ask you what your interpretation of this trend is? Where 5 days ago was the first poll where Bibi was leading Benny Gantz as the public's pick for prime minister, and the seat differential between Gantz's coalition, Gantz's party, and the Likud was 4 seats. In other words, Gantz would be predicted, if the election was held today, to win by 4 seats, 4 more seats. And then in December, that gap was 19. And then there's also talk of, but beyond that, there's also talk of other types of coalitions forming, right? There's a talk of another sort of right-wing supergroup, right? A sort of traveling Wilburys, an Israeli Wilburys, the wandering Jews. So maybe it would be the wandering Wilburys. There's a wandering Wilburys possibly forming that would kind of shove Gantz out of the spotlight and all that. So what is public opinion doing also? It all seems very hard to interpret what people are thinking, what they are expecting. And it feels like sometimes that really does come from the top down. When leadership doesn't have a plan, everybody sort of goes. But I'm just wondering I'm not sure I really understand what the public has been thinking either. And maybe that's coming from the top, but it's just a strange.
No, I think you're right. And look, the polls from 5-6 days ago was that Bibi was sort of back on top for the first time in months. Then a poll from yesterday suggests that Gantz is back with a slight lead. And I think this sort of pendulum that's swinging somewhat wildly right now is the result of that lack of direction from the top. And yes, as John notes correctly, there is a triumvirate, right? It's Gantz and it's Gallant and it's Bibi. But at the end of the day, Bibi's the prime minister. And when we see this kind of chaos, it does not help. And I will just tell you, as a guy that's been watching the Israeli media, and not just from the left, but also from the right, like I'll watch Channel 12, but also Channel 14, which is like the Bibi channel. The frustration is growing. People want to see the North handled. They want to see Gaza finished. They don't understand why Israel's best ally here in the U.S., why we're ambivalent, why we're not supporting them. They were thrilled when Bibi announced that he was going to be coming to Washington. And I think, by the way, that may have given him something of a bump, right? Everybody knew that was coming. And it was like, Bibi's back. But I don't know if he is. This guy does not look like he has a handle on things the way that he used to. And I will tell you just anecdotally that the folks that I've talked to in Israel, I hear that he's tired. I hear that he's beat up. I hear
he's
that
75 years old.
Yeah. And
he's in very good shape for a guy who's 75 years old. But we're talking here about our election between the 78-year-old guy and the 81-year-old guy.
The spring chicken compared to our field, right?
He is, but wars age people when they're in their 30s.
Right.
This is Israel's worst war in 50 years, and maybe its worst war ever. We don't even know how to calculate this.
I would agree that it probably is. I actually counted that there are at least 11 fronts where Israel is fighting right now.
Right.
That's massive. right? When you begin to think about it, I mean, it's Gaza,
For a
it's
country
West
of
Bank,
that size and an army of that
right?
size.
But it's Gaza, West Bank, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, Iran, Egypt, and Jordan, right? Where we look at those regimes that are getting ground down by the Iranians, and then you've got the campus and media realm here in the U.S. You've got the lawfare realm, and then you've got a trade war that's happening. This is he cannot, and then that doesn't even include the political realm, which is brutal in Israel. He's fighting that separately, right? Trying to hang on. It's tough for him right now, and it just might be time for someone else to come in with just a different perspective, maybe a different level of credibility with this administration. Not that I want to appease this administration. I think they have manipulated Israel. I think if you saw the other day, Blinken was calling Gantz and Gallant and not calling Bibi. And they were literally broadcasting this through the State Department website, saying that, Blinken is having these conversations without the prime minister of Israel. You can see the manipulation and you can see the exhaustion. And I just don't think it's a good combo right now.
Is that part of the chaos too? Because are people watching this in Israel and saying, well, 3 months ago, 3 months ago, we wanted to put the crown on Gantz's head. We would have anointed him. And that has changed. Also, is part of that this sort of unease? Is there an unease among the public with how everybody in Israeli leadership is dealing with the United States?
Look, you would think, reading the coverage, both, and by the way, in the Anglophone Israeli press, not just the stuff that Jonathan Fancy Pants, multilingual Jonathan, sitting there watching all of the different Israeli channels in Hebrew and Arabic and all of that. But if you read the Anglophone Israel, you would not know that Bibi has had a political recovery, at least in polling. Like, you'd barely know that, and that he was like on the ropes, as few people have been on the ropes, like Rishi Sunak was. And then Sunak called the dumbest snap election in world history, but he was on the ropes. And then, he's just like put his head down and done his job. And I think Gantz has disappointed people. And it's possible that Gantz has disappointed people. Because he was just the not Bibi, right? Gantz is doesn't have a political identity, except he's the not Bibi. And then maybe, to be honest, he just started seeming like he was the representative of the Biden State Department in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv. And while I think
that's what he is, John. I think that's exactly what he is.
Well, Biden himself remains, I believe, Israelis remain oddly sympathetic or supportive of Biden because they think because he came and he was there and he showed up and he did all that, and that the bad guys, if you are of the sort to think that Israel needs to focus and be resolute and win the war, are Sullivan and Blinken, because they're the ones who come over and yell at Israel. There is a silent majority in Israel that wants this war. It's weird because it's a silent supermajority. There is a silent supermajority. 75 to 80% of the country wants this war to end with Hamas destroyed and Israel winning. And then there is a tiny minority that is being fronted by this activist group of 100 families, 100 hostage families, who are very much the face of the idea that the war needs to end so that the hostages can come home. And nobody in Israel doesn't want the hostages to come home, and everybody feels horribly for the families, and a lot of people know the families and know people who know the families. It's a nation of 9 million people. Everybody is one degree of separation removed from a hostage, or two at most. And so it's not like they can say, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry for you, everything is terrible, but you're going to have to stand aside because the nation needs this war to be won, and terrible things may happen as a result of it. No one can say that. No politician can say it. And in fact, things got so bad, in my view, in regard to this interestingly distortive effect that this small group of people is having, that Bibi made an unforced error and issued this new proposal. Nobody was asking for it. Hamas had already rejected 3 different proposals. He felt it necessary for political reasons to go back in, to dip his toe in the water. And my guess is that the language of the proposal that we haven't seen, because he doesn't want anybody to see it, was badly drafted, did not say explicitly that phase 2 meant that Hamas was out of power. It did not say that, though it may have been implicit in his understanding of it. And that's what created the opening. And that's why Jonathan is right, that he may have slipped his gear as a man in his 70s under unbelievable and intolerable pressure and doing things. By the way, the War Cabinet approved the deal. He's not the only one responsible. What's more, the 2 important mainstream old line religious parties, Shas and United Torah Judaism, last night said they were for the deal. But we don't know what that means, that they're for the deal. They're for a ceasefire to get the hostages out. But the deal and their understanding may be, we have a 6-week ceasefire to get hostages out, and then we go in and destroy Hamas. My view is this is a terrible strategy. You're giving Hamas 6 weeks to regroup, or they have another way out that Israel hasn't found, that Israel hasn't blocked, and where they're going to be staging things and terrible stuff is going to happen, and they're going to regroup and reconstitute for 6 weeks when they're on the run. Nonetheless, it's a better strategy than we have a ceasefire, and then we have more ceasefire, and then we have even more ceasefire, and it's okay because they're degraded, and the Palestinian Authority will come in to run everything because it's so great. And then they'll be part of the Palestinian Authority too. And that'll be wonderful because just like in Lebanon, there's nothing better for a governmental body to have a terrorist group as part of the government, like Hamas or Hezbollah. Really has a really positive effect on the stability of the region and the threat to Israel. So that's where I think this is. And the Israeli public is having a nervous breakdown. 8 months into the war,
they are. But let me
and justifiably so. I mean, I'm not saying
absolutely.
This like
they were
they're not. Yeah,
they were being promised. They were being sold a complete victory, and now what they're watching is this thing just getting ground down into some kind of. Not a ceasefire, but not a war. I mean, right? I mean, and total confusion, total chaos. Look, one thing I'll just note is, first of all, Shas. We know that, they're pretty good at extortion. That's usually why they make decisions. And I want to know what Bibi offered Shas in order for them to support the ceasefire. I think that it's money. I think that it's power. That's usually the way this thing works. And Shas is quite good at that. So I wouldn't take that as a signal that this is somehow okay with the broader segment of the Israeli public. But there is
one other thing I just should mention about Shas that's important here. Is that Shas is in a complicated position, if we really want to get in the weeds, is in a complicated position with the ransoming of hostages issue, because Israel's determination that it should start adopting a policy where it was acceptable to ransom for hostages is the direct result of a Talmudic ruling by Shas's founder, Rav Ovadia Yosef, who in 1977 issued this diktat as the chief Sephardic rabbi of Israel and the leading Talmudist in Israel at the time, saying that this complex bit of post-biblical understanding that if people are kidnapped by other tribes, it is legitimate to ransom for them, or you should ransom for them, became a diktat for the Israeli government after Entebbe, that you didn't need to go and stage an unbelievably dangerous rescue effort every single time, that you could look to Jewish history and ransom hostages. And I have to say that in geopolitical terms, absent Israeli and Jewish law or a Jewish understanding of law, that this is one of the most ruinous policies that has ever been enacted by any country ever. This war is the direct result of that. of the hostage release in 2011, and others before it. And so Shas has some moral responsibility. Like if Shas said, no, you don't need to ransom hostages, that would be like, oh, gee, thanks a lot. So now 50 years after you like set us down this path, now you're too big for your britches on ransoming hostages. So story is a little trickier. It's not just money, it's also the reputation of its George Washington, or its founder. Anyway, not to get, as I say, not
No,
to get
I think it's a good point, but I want to make one other, and that is that I think we had a delegation of Israelis come to visit us yesterday, and these are people that are seasoned and they know this space. They made their rounds around Washington, and I think they were shocked at what they heard from across various elements of our bureaucracy, that the U.S. was not advocating for a victory, that the U.S. was ambivalent at best about an Israeli victory in Gaza, and ambivalent about the widening of the war, even as Israel takes fire from the north, even as they take fire from others. I have to say that I think they are frozen because they had expected the U.S. to be with them all the way. And when they don't see that, all of a sudden they feel far more isolated. They are without direction. Really, what I think we've reached a moment in this war, if I can maybe try to sum it up, it's that Israel is now being forced to make independent decisions, and it just doesn't want to. That the leadership, I think, had expected Biden to be there, expected the Pentagon to be there, expected the American people to be there. And what they're watching is the wheels are falling off this thing. They want to win. They know they have the capability to win, but they need the armaments and they need the political support. They need the cover at the UN. They're not getting any of that. And I think we're absolutely at a crossroads here. We may have been at that crossroads for the last 3 months, but I think it's now starting to dawn on the Israeli people that, okay, you know what? We're going to have to do this ourselves. And that is not an easy thing for them to do.
One last point about this. I went and I listened. It was very hard to listen to the podcast that we did on October 8th. We recorded it on the evening of October 8th, Sunday night, for Monday morning. I would commend it to you if you can find it as a historical document, because it's, as I say, for me, it was very hard to listen to. I'm pretty much like on the verge of tears the entire time. Dan Senor was on. A lot of what we talked about came to pass. And one of the first things we said was Israel's not going to have a lot of time, despite the fact that everybody is horrified by what's happened. Israel got 34 days of free reign from the United States government in 2006 when it was fighting in Lebanon. And then Condoleezza Rice said, that's it, you got to pull back. And we were wrong. But we weren't that wrong, because I think now, if you look back historically, Israel's lack of free movement in winning this war began around 37 days after it started fighting. Started fighting in late October, went in late October. By the beginning, Then there was the ceasefire in November, right? There was the week's pause. Around then or right after is when the United States government started saying, you're being indiscriminate. There's too much death. There's too much going on. They didn't say stop fighting. They didn't say we're done with you. They didn't say come to an international meeting. But that was when the oxygen started to get choked off bit by little bit, and the nerves of the Israeli government and the war cabinet about what they could do that might not trigger an American reaction began to become part of the war fighting protocol and the policies that they were engaging in on the battlefield. And you can sort of say, therefore, that while it wasn't as vulgar as you're done, it was fight it differently, fight it in a way that no other military has ever been asked to fight a war. Do what we say, and we're still not going to give you credit for doing it because we got Arabs in Dearborn giving us shit. And on and on and on. And so I think if we actually look back on it, they really didn't get much more time than in Lebanon. It had a different structure. It had a different thing. And of course, what happened...
And it was also, it was front-loaded with so much enthusiasm, right?
Yes.
From the Biden administration, which is safe to do if you know it's not really going to last long.
Right. Okay. Well, Christine Rosen, I believe you are up with today's commentary recommends.
Yes, we had a little bit of a hot potato tossing around who was going to get the recommendation. We didn't plan in advance, as sometimes is our want. Okay, you guys have muted me on my love of weird Japanese dystopian fiction for many months, so the ban is still in place. However, I have to recommend. I was with my kids. We wanted to watch a movie over the weekend, and we put on Netflix, and guess what was there? Like a wonderful surprise. Godzilla -1. This is a movie that came out in 2023. I'm sure many people have already seen it, but now you can see it on Netflix. And it's an awesome summer movie. It's just an amazing movie. It has that perfect blend of Japanese cheesiness about Godzilla with kind of serious moral questions about post-traumatic stress and how soldiers cope with new realities. It's set in the immediate post-war period in Japan. And it's just perfectly done. It got very widely and well reviewed when it first came out, but I think a lot of people missed it in the movie theater. You can now see it on Netflix. I don't really know what else to say about it, except that there's a reason it became kind of an instant classic and why it's now, in the pantheon of the Godzilla franchise. It's just excellent on so many levels. So I'm recommending Godzilla -1 since we're in summer now.
It is so good. And I'm not a fan of the kaiju films. I always thought they were ridiculous and silly. And this movie, which really does have this, I mean, maybe it's common in Japanese film, though I've seen a lot of Japanese film, this recreation of the post-war rubble around Tokyo and Kyoto and other places, and how people were like scrambling to live in the shock after not only the bombs, but just the destruction of Tokyo by the US and all of that. It's beautiful to look at. It's very solemn, so that the silliness of the appearance of the giant irradiated sea monster dinosaur comes as a kind of a startling thing, and the special effects are so extraordinary that it actually won the Oscar last year for special effects. This little Japanese movie that cost $11 million to make,
and doesn't feel like over the top CGI either, which is always the danger nowadays, is how surreal the CGI can appear. It doesn't feel real.
It's really it is a startlingly good movie, and so an excellent recommendation. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Jonathan Schanzer, for your wisdom and for contributing to a tone of crushing morosity we haven't quite hit for a couple of weeks. Got to get back to it. You got to be true to your brand. And so you have fulfilled your mandate as a contributing editor, and for that I congratulate you.
We aim to not please.
Exactly. And so for Abe, Christine, and Seth, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.